welcome to the Passenger Seat Podcast, a podcast designed to fill your passenger seat with chat about classic cars, all recorded from my 1968 Morris Minor Peggy. I'm Becca, and today I'm on my way home from doing a bit of shopping following the weekend to stock back up with supplies. So Peggy's out again, and just on our way home. So I thought I'd tell you all about our weekend away with the Morris Register at Thoresby Park. So the Morris Register event starts on the Friday, and being kind of some of the closest people in the young members to Thoresby Park, it's about an hour and a half's drive for us up the A1. We made sure to be there pretty early on the Friday to try and save ourselves a spot, ideally together at the event, for us all to kind of camp together. And so we got there quite early. I think we got there for about 11:30, 12 o'clock-ish, and found a nice spot by the trees in the Thoresby Park sign, popped the tent up, went all together pretty easy as usual. We really do love our bell tent, looks great, and hasn't caused us any arguments yet, so that's a bonus. And then it was a case of having a spot of lunch, quick drink and sit, warding off as many people from the little area that we'd kind of saved for the other young members. And I was then fortunate enough that Andy had offered me a drive in his Morris Oxford Bullnose from 1926. He'd come across at the Morris Minor Owners Club National Rally and said if I wanted to have a go, because I have previously said on the podcast about having a go in an earlier Morris, and he was very kind enough to let us go over and film that. So that's going to be in another podcast, talking through kind of me getting to grips with the Morris and learning a little bit about the particular quirks of that bullnose. And had a lovely time driving around the field with Andy in Billy the Bullnose, and learnt some really interesting things about that. So make sure that you're following or subscribed, depending on where you're listening to this, so that you get to see that in a couple of weeks' time. But following that, Andy said to me, kind of as a bit of a joke, "You don't happen to have a brake light switch, do you?" And as it happened, at this exact event last year, Peggy's brake light switch on the Morris Minor had gone, and I did have a spare Morris Minor brake light switch, because when I'd bought that one, I'd bought two, because I didn't really need anything else from ESM at the time, and I was paying postage, and I thought, well, I might as well have a second one in case the one we fit doesn't work, and if not, it can go in my spares bag. And when the package arrived, I went round to my dad's with two brake light switches. He was like, "I can't believe you bought two, you'll probably never need another one, and nobody will really want to change that on the field." But anyway, Andy had said to me, "Have you got a brake light switch?" And I said, "Well, I've got one for a Morris Minor, but I take it you mean for something a bit older, because most of the cars at this Morris Register event are Morris Register vehicles, which are the pre-war Morris." And he said, "No, actually it is for a Morris Traveller. Just over there, there's a light blue Morris Traveller that the guy's brake light switch seems to have gone on the way in." So he could do the brake light switch, but none of us on the auto jumble have got one. And I knew that nobody on the auto jumble carried one, because I'd asked for the same thing the year previously. So I said, right, I'll go grab it for him, and you guys can get that fitted. So I went and grabbed it, and he said he was very pleased and very thankful. And he said, "How much do I owe you?" And I said, "I don't know. I can't remember how much they cost when I bought them a year ago, and I haven't got any data or internet access to check what they are on ESM at the moment, because everything is so bad signal in Thoresby Park." So he said, "Okay, well, on the road run tomorrow, I'll have a look and I'll let you know, and I'll come over and make sure I give you some money." I said, "Well, yeah, don't worry about it. Main thing is that you've got brake lights," kind of thing. So Andy and this gentleman fitted the brake light, and they were very pleased with it. And in that time, Tom and Harry with Mabel and their teardrop caravan Terence had turned up, and Elliot and his mum Bridget had turned up as well. So they were starting to get set up camping next to ourselves. So once they were set up, it was pretty much time for the curry night at the Morris Register event. Now, if you remember from last year, we'd struggled a little bit with getting our exact order because it is such a huge scale thing to do, and we'd also been the last people, which, when Jamie loves curry as much as he does, seeing everyone else getting their curries and then his turning up the last and not being quite what we'd asked for was a little bit sad for him, but he made up last year by having a few of the spares that were left. Well, this year it was the complete opposite. We were the absolute first people to get our order, and we really enjoyed it, got exactly what we'd asked for. I think it had gone a lot more smoothly this year, helped by the fact that it wasn't raining, I think. And not only that, there seemed to be even more spares than previous years that were handed over by the restaurant. So Jamie was able to have a few extra bits as well. So we did really well. I think we paid something like £23 for our 2 curries and a few of the side bits and things like that. But ended up with loads more than that, so that was really great. Following on from that, during the curry, Liam, Beth and Basil the dog had arrived and grabbed their curry, and we'd noticed in the programme that there had been the addition of an automotive quiz, and we decided that we'd all like to take part in that. And so unfortunately, because there were 7 of us, it was a need for 2 teams, so we split off into the better halves, which was Beth, Jamie and Tom, and then the even better halves, which was myself, Liam, Harry and Elliot, and set about the quiz. And it was quite a difficult quiz. A lot of it was very much pre-war Morris focused, so not something we knew a lot about, but I guess we learned some other stuff. But we managed to do surprisingly well. Elliot did fantastic at pulling a few answers out of goodness knows where, and helping us get a few more points. And we were consistently on our team a few more points ahead of the better halves. And then in the last round, it was kind of alphabet themed, and you had to think of car names that had, for each letter of the alphabet, if you could get double letters for both make and model, then you got double points. But if somebody who was called the Oracle thought of the same car as you, then you got no points for that one. And we did really well at that. I think we got something like 26, which was quite good. And it actually meant that as a team we came joint second in the quiz, which was quite a surprise for us because we thought we were doing terribly all the way through. Celebrations of our win carried on back at the tents, where we sat round and had a few drinks and chatted a little bit more. Liam and Beth put up their tent that they never actually slept in because they ended up popping back home every night. But it was useful because they kept their seats and useful camping equipment for the rest of us in when we'd forgotten a few bits and pieces. I didn't sleep particularly well because it was absolutely freezing, coldest night in the last few months, and we really felt it. But we woke up reasonably early the next morning and moved ourselves out of the shadows of the trees that we were camping in into the sun to try and warm up a little bit. And it was a very warm day yet again on the Sunday. We started off the day with a little bit of breakfast and a cup of tea before we went out on the road run. The three of us in our the three moggies of the young owners all did it in convoy. So that was Mabel belonging to Harry and Tom, Alison belonging to Elliot, and Peggy. And we set off in the first on the way there to Sherwood Restorations, which was our intended destination, in the lead, and did a frankly terrible job of navigating. We're usually quite good at navigating tulip maps, but this one just didn't seem to quite gel with us, and we ended up following a Morris 8 that had absolutely no clue where it was going. So we made an executive decision through the walkie-talkies to Elliot, who was at the back, that we were just going to type in to Google Sherwood Restorations and get there as quickly as possible and as directly as possible, because it wasn't going to plan. And anyway, we got there, and it was a fantastic place to walk around, some really beautiful cars, lovingly restored, and it was quite fun to walk around and discuss, well, if you had this amount of money, which few cars would you buy? What if you had this amount of money? And they had some really interesting cars having some work done in the workshop as well that we were able to have a little bit of a nosy at. So great kind of pit stop, and by the time that we'd come out, the car park had filled up far more than our three cars, with quite a few more of the pre-war Morrises, including the Morris 8 that had got quite lost in front of us. And yeah, we had a little walk around some of those, a chat to some of the owners before we embarked on our trip back. The drive back was far more pleasant. Harry and Tom were in front, followed by Elliot in the middle and ourselves at the back, and we managed to get some really nice photos and footage of our little convoy from being at the back. And Tom did a far better job at navigating and sticking to the map. It was much clearer on the way home, and we even managed to pull over on the way home and take a couple of photos in a quite scenic little spot, and even get admired by a Ford that was zooming past around the corner that we were parked on, and enjoy him stopping and taking a photo of our little cars, which is quite unusual. We got back in time for a bit of lunch, a drink and a sit before the gymkhana kicked off at 3 o'clock. You might remember that last year I did okay at the gymkhana, but Beth and Liam won in Beth's Morris Minor Shabs. However, they hadn't made it back to site on the Saturday in time to take part in Liam's midget. So we were flying the flag for the young members. Unfortunately, it didn't go exactly to plan. We did quite well at the hoop toss, but didn't get much better than anybody else really. The slalom was where I really had a downfall, because last year we'd bungeed the little tray that they put on your bonnet to the bonnet, and that had stayed on quite well, and we hadn't dropped the ball once last year, and we got quite a good speed. But this year the guy didn't think that people were using the bungees, so we didn't go for it, and other cars that went after us did, and it was a big regret, because the ball never left the tray just left the bonnet, so the whole thing was sliding off the bonnet as we went round the slalom and down some of the dips in the uneven ground. And it was quite unfortunate that we didn't do particularly well. I think we added a whole 20 seconds to our time from last year, so we're definitely demanding the bungee cords next year. But we went on to the beanbag toss, did quite well at that. The guy said that we'd done well compared to previous people. And then did the reverse parking blindfolded. And I'd learnt from last year to not sit there and try and work out in my head whilst blindfolded where I thought we were. And just blindly listen to what Jamie had said. And it worked much better for us. The guy said we did really well at that, and actually had the most central position at the end of anyone so far. But unfortunately it wasn't good enough to win, and we weren't winners when they did the announcement the following day. But it's a lot of fun, and I do love taking part in it each year, and hopefully I'll get third time lucky next year. The winner actually was another Morris Minor that we know, so it was good to keep it in the club, and yeah, like I said, maybe I'll be third time lucky next year. After that we did a little walk around some of the auto jumble, and the gentleman who I had sold, given the brake light switch to the day before, actually came up to me and said, I looked it up while we were out, and the brake light switches are about £6 or £7 on ESM. So having had me bore him with the story about my dad and the brake light switch never being needed yesterday, he said to me, so I'll give you a tenner, and then you can tell your dad not only did somebody need it, but you were able to turn a profit. So it was very kind of him, and he didn't really need to give me anything. It was just a joy that somebody actually was able to use it. But I did very swiftly turn that £10 note into a new gear knob for Peggy, and also a few eye bolt pins from the auto jumble that I wanted for when I do the front suspension bushes again. Following on from our walk around the auto jumble, it was getting pretty hot, so we headed back to the shade of the tents and set up to cook ourselves some barbecue that Jamie, Harry and Tom had gone out in Mabel to collect, and have a lovely night sat round the fire. We were joined by Izzy and James, who I'd managed to catch up with earlier in the day, having not seen them since last year. It was really nice to catch up with them and have a little chat, and then they joined us for the evening while we were sat round having a nice chat and a drink, and then joined us for much of the Sunday as well, so that was lovely. When Liam and Beth headed back home, most of us headed off to our tents as well to get some sleep. I slept a lot better on the following night, and woke up quite early, ready on the Sunday to get the cars into prime position, and some young members banners next to our three little Morris Minors on display, and then went back to the tents now that the cars were all parked up to have a spot of breakfast and a cup of tea before the event really started to kick off. And it was really nice because we'd seen a lot of the cars obviously on display, driving around and things, or even just around the campsite while we'd been walking around. But the Sunday, when they're all lined up in their classes, it was really nice to go for a walk around with James, Izzy and Elliot, and look at all the cars that were there and take them in. And Izzy's been going to these for quite a few years now, since she was 16, so she was able to keep us informed about a few bits and pieces to do with the cars that we perhaps might have not have already spotted. And between us we all had some pretty firm favourites, one being a gorgeous yellow Morris 8 Tourer, that looked well loved and well used, which is always nice to see. And the other one being one that actually went on to win quite a few awards, a Morris Minor arrow-bodied replica, which had a gorgeous leather body and was just absolutely pristine and not like anything else that was there in terms of it looking so different and being leather bodied. It was also nice that if you are a Morris Register owner but you haven't got a Morris on the road, you're able to bring along another classic. So there was a few other classics there on display for us to have a look at, and a particular favourite of us all was a green and cream Morris Austin Healey 3000. After walking around all the cars, a spot of lunch, I managed to coerce a few people into the backseat of Peggy to do a little interview about their classic car ownership and their experiences of the weekend, which was really lovely and great fun. And you'll be able to see that in another future podcast in the not too distant future. So make sure that you're following or subscribed for those. We had a little bit of an explore of Thoresby Park. We hadn't had much of a walk round and things of the rest of the park last year because of the horrific rain, but the beautiful sunshine and everything that was going on this year meant that we were more inclined to explore a little bit more. And in the distance we could hear the sound of the colliery band that were playing in the main tent for the afternoon. We also took advantage of some very well priced ice creams a couple of times during the day to try and help us keep cool. And then it was time for the prize giving and wrapping up and heading home. But yeah, it was a fantastic weekend. We had such a lovely time camping with friends, seeing some lovely cars, exploring a little bit of the roads around Thoresby, and generally just making memories with our cars and our friends that we've made through the car clubs. And it's great that the Thoresby event is just so welcoming and such a nice place to be for us all. It's so central, and yeah, it made for a really nice weekend, as it did last year. And it goes to show really that if you stick it out, even if the weather's grim and miserable, it can be a lot of fun, and the event is worthwhile regardless of the weather. So yeah, as I've probably already hinted at, I suspect it's going to become an annual event so that I can keep having a go at their fantastic gymkhana and hopefully improving my score each time. But yeah, if you've not already seen last year's, make sure that you check out the podcast for that. It was the same sort of time last year, and you can make some comparisons to the number of cars and things that were there. I think surprisingly, despite the weather being better this year, the fact it was the Jubilee year last year meant that there was far better turnout of some of the more unusual Morrises, but that didn't mean that the ones that were on display this year weren't something different and interesting to look at, because so many people had spent a good amount of time restoring them recently, and there was definitely some new ones to see. But yeah, I hope you've enjoyed hearing about our weekend and you're looking forward to the follow-up podcasts that were recorded at the event. And in the meantime, drive safely and happy motoring.